Countdown for a launch. Everything looked good. While we were watching that video, the team has moved the strongback away from the Falcon 9. We've done thrust vector control checkouts on the upper stage engine. We've done alignment of the guidance system. We've completed fuel loading on first and second stage, and we have just ended LOX loading on stage 1. So we're down to loading LOX on stage 2. Then we'll go into the final countdown sequence starting at T-minus 1 minute. Now, one note coming up at about 90 seconds, if you see and hear a large venting off of the strongback, that's normal. We'll be draining liquid oxygen out of the structure alongside of the rocket, and sometimes that'll condense a lot of the moisture in the air at Vandenberg into a cloud. But for that, Iridium is go. The range has just announced their green. The weather is go. So we're going to listen into the last minute and 45 of the countdown of Falcon 9 with Iridium next.
Vehicles in self-line. Vehicle gas closeouts have started.
AFTS is ready for launch.
Falcon 9's in startup. Stage 2 tanks pressing for flight.
LD is go for launch. T-minus 30 seconds. 20.
Stage 1 tanks pressing for flight.
15. 10. 9. 8. 7. 6. 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. Liftoff, Falcon 9.
Vehicles cleared for time.
Takeoff propulsion numbers.
Moving to 3.170.
Power telemetry on nominal.
T plus a minute 10 into flight. We've just gone through throttle down and throttle back up of the Falcon 9 first stage engines. We've gone through max Q on the first stage. First stage continues to look good on the engines, headed downrange away from Vandenberg Air Force Base. We're chilling in the MVAC engine 2 minutes into flight, getting it ready for ignition. Next major event coming up in 30 seconds is shutdown of the 9 first stage engines, followed by stage separation and ignition of the second stage engine. Shortly after that, we hope to get a view of payload fairing separation from the second stage.
Stage separation confirmed.
Boost back from startup.
We've had successful separation and ignition of the upper stage engine. First words from propulsion, things look good on the upper stage engine and the second stage.
Boost
Next
back
up,
from
we should
shutdown.
see fairing separation.
Fairing separation confirmed.
You hear the applause from the team gathered around Mission Control Center here in Hawthorne. It's 5:30 in the evening. Second shift is in. They're watching the flight. Fairing separation looked very good, exposing the 10 Iridium Next satellites to the vacuum of outer space. We're 3.5 minutes plus into flight. Second stage performance continues to look excellent. T plus 4 minutes into flight. Falcon 9 second stage continues to perform nominally. Power on the engine looks good. Avionics looks good. Guidance looks, we're on track, headed south away from California, eventually overflying the South Polar Cap on our way off of Eastern Africa, where we'll eventually deploy, later in the webcast, the 10 Iridium Next satellites. T plus 5 minutes into flight, you can see the camera views looking back on the nozzle of the MVAC-D Merlin vacuum engine. Red hot, which is just what we expect at this stage of flight. The engine is at full power, continuing to perform normally, as I like to say. And meanwhile, the second stage is on trajectory, headed for its initial low Earth parking orbit. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but for now, everything continues to look good. T plus 6 minutes into flight. Falcon 9, second stage, carrying 10 Iridium Next satellites, is currently west and south of the tip of Baja, California. I hope that everybody in Southern California had a great view of the launch this evening. We've had clear skies, the rocket launching about half an hour after sunset. Now, currently, we're in burn 1. This takes us into the low Earth parking orbit. That's a temporary orbit that we'll be in for about half an orbit around the Earth before we relight the upper stage engine, and that will move us with its second burn into the final orbit. We'll be bringing you that second burn later on in the webcast.
Stage 1 entry startup. Stage 1 entry burn. Entry shut down.
Stage 1, AFTS.
7.5 minutes into flight. Falcon 9 second stage continues to perform well. We are continuing on the desired trajectory, headed south from Vandenberg Air Force Base, California, heading into an approximate polar orbit with the Iridium Next satellites. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to have 2 burns. We're in the first burn right now. This is the long burn, just over
less
6
cookoff
minutes.
expected.
We're beginning to throttle down power on the upper stage engine, preparing for shutdown about a minute from now.
Transonic.
Meanwhile, we'll then go into a coast period of 42 minutes between the end of the burn that we're on now and then the relight that'll come over the eastern hemisphere. So during that coast phase, we're going to pause live commentary. We'll have a map so that you can see our path as we go over the southern polar regions en route to going east of Africa. We've heard the call out. Stage 2 flight termination system has safed in preparation for going into orbit. Once we go into orbit, we'll wait to hear a call from the guidance nav and control engineer called GNC on the quality of that orbit. And we've had good shutdown of the second stage engine. Now we're waiting to hear and take a look at the orbit.
Nominal orbit insertion.
Cook Delta.
And we've
LOS.
heard the call out, a good nominal orbit insertion.
All right, stage 1 has splashed
So
down.
currently the first stage mission has completed. We separated the second stage. It took over, did a burn lasting just over 6 minutes. We've had shutdown on that first burn of the second stage engine. We're in a good orbit. We're going to go into a coast phase now, followed by a relight of the upper stage engine. So we're going to stop live commentary right now. I'll get ready for coming back on at T plus 51 minutes, about 41 minutes from now. So with that, we'll leave you with a map of the progress of Falcon 9, still with the 10 Iridium Next satellites made it to the payload dispenser, and we'll be back to watch the second burn and then the eventual release of the 10 satellites.